The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? It's Sunday. Sunday, August 17th, and I am still, as you can tell, in Lisbon, Portugal. And I will say, this is the price of doing a show on Sunday. I just discovered something when I came in this evening into my office here in Lisbon, and that is that I'm pretty sure they turn the air conditioning off on the weekends. So I don't know about you guys, but Europeans, there must be some Europeans listening to me. AC is good. Air conditioning is a life-sustaining value. It should be always on. I'm willing to pay a little bit more rent. Just keep the frigging AC on. It is so hot in here. It's been 90 outside all day. And I don't know what the temperature is in here, but I am sweating. So if I start getting undressed during the show, you will know why. Yeah, frustrating. Hot. Anyway, all right. Thank you guys for joining me on this Sunday, and I appreciate it. And we're going to be talking about. I was debating what we're going to talk about today, and the reality is that the Trump-Putin thing is too good to not talk about. But I wanted to put it in a wider framework, in a wider context, which is, I think, the principles that should guide a rational foreign policy, and in particular an America First foreign policy, although the principles I think would apply to any country up to a point. We can talk about the difference between America and other countries, and America and a small country. But yeah, I mean, what happened yesterday with Trump and Putin was just too good not to talk about today. And tomorrow, there'll be plenty to talk about, because tomorrow we've got Zelensky in on it. So tomorrow, Zelensky is coming to Washington, D.C. And here's the thing. It went so badly on Friday. It was such an utter defeat and humiliation for the Americans that Zelensky and the Europeans are convinced that Trump is going to go ballistic on Zelensky. That what came out of Friday is clearly a Putin victory, and Trump siding with Putin. And they are really, really, really worried. I mean, they were worried about the meeting between Putin and Trump, but now they're really worried about this meeting between Zelensky and Trump, and the fact that Trump will try to bully Zelensky. In a sense, what Putin did to Trump, Trump will now try to do to Zelensky. And they're petrified. And as a consequence of that, they're sending a whole entourage to Washington, D.C. Not only is Zelensky coming to the White House, but we have a list of people who are going to join him, starting with European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen, something like that. She will be joining President Zelensky. In addition, Secretary General of NATO, the guy who called Trump daddy or something like that, Mark Rutte, something like that. The Dutch out there can correct my pronunciation, will also be joining Zelensky. But that's not all. The president of the Republic of France, Emmanuel Macron, is getting on a plane and flying tomorrow to Washington, D.C. to be in the meeting with Zelensky. I think he hopes, although it's not clear he's going to be invited. And that's not all. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is going to join as well. I mean, I don't know. Who else? I mean, all we need now is Greta. Greta should come. Europeans should send their best. This is how afraid they are of Trump bullying Zelensky, is that they are sending all their big hitters to Washington, D.C. to help him and support him and help him confront Trump. It's not clear how many of them are going to be allowed into the meeting, although I find it hard to believe that if Merz and Macron and Rutte and Leyen are all going to be there, they're not going to be in a meeting, or they're not going to be in the White House. I think somewhere else I read that maybe even the president of Finland will come, because he has a good rapport supposedly with Trump, so he might come. This is all out, a full court press, as they say in basketball, on Trump. Maybe with this amount of support for Zelensky, Trump will actually grow some balls. I don't know. It probably not. Maybe during the meeting he'll give in to them and then return to his ballless regular existence. But wow. Maybe Starmer will also join. I don't know if Starmer's going to make the trip. I don't know how good his relationship is. This is quite something. And basically what this tells you is how badly the meeting on Friday went. And as I said at the time, I predicted this. I said, Trump didn't have an agenda going into the meeting. He didn't know what he wanted to achieve. He is not a strategic thinker. He cannot play 3D, never mind 4 or 5D, anything. He went into the meeting assuming that his charm and his, gravitas will influence Putin to give Trump something. And the one thing Trump wanted, and Trump seemingly went into the meeting with just one thing, was the ceasefire. That Putin put off the table completely. So then now, if you listen to Marco Rubio over the weekend and you listen to Trump himself over the weekend, now they're anti-ceasefire. They don't want a ceasefire. They want a peace deal all the way, no ceasefire in the meantime, which is what Putin has always said. And basically, Trump completely capitulated on what seemingly is the one thing that he went into the meeting wanting to achieve. Putin basically didn't bend on anything. He wants all 4 provinces. The land swap is not the 2 southern provinces that link up to Crimea that Russia has conquered from Ukraine. It's not those 2 provinces. Russia has tiny little bits of land near Sumy and near Kharkiv that they're willing to give up if they get the rest of Donbass and the rest of Luhansk. They've got basically all of Luhansk, so the rest of Donbass. So Ukraine is going to give up their strategic positions in Donetsk to get slightly pieces of land that they're not even worth fighting for in Sumy and Kharkiv. I don't have a map here with me, but it's absurd. Putin went into the whole thing, both in a press conference and in his meeting with Trump, about the source of the Ukrainian conflict, the real problem between Ukraine and Russia. And the real problem, the source of the problem is that Ukraine's not Russian, that Ukraine should be part of Russia. Again, Putin has not given up anything. He wants Ukraine. And he might take these 4 provinces for now, but he will demand a change in regime in Ukraine. He's going to demand that it be weakened militarily. He might agree to some kind of soft, security guarantee. But Ukraine already has a security guarantee from the United States over the 1996 giving up nuclear weapons. And Putin knows this, and he knows the security guarantee without joining NATO is actually worthless. America, particularly under Trump, is not going to send troops to Ukraine to fight Russia. Ever. It's just not happening. So Putin has nothing to lose by saying, yeah, okay, you can do some kind of security guarantee, but they can't join NATO. Because he knows NATO troops will actually be sent in. In every respect, and talk about principles, one of the principles of foreign policy is you don't negotiate with evil. You do not negotiate with evil unless it's for their surrender. Unless it's for fundamental change towards becoming good. But you don't negotiate with evil. And when you do, you lose. And when you give evil, I don't know, credit, when you give evil a pedestal, when you give evil, the honor and respect and friendship, then you are going to be eaten alive, which is what Trump gave him. So, red carpet. You saw the photos of U.S. troops on the ground, on their knees, rolling out the red carpet in front of Putin. You give him a red carpet. You greet him warmly with a. I mean, think about how Trump greets people generally. I mean, he shook his hand, he smiled, he patted him on the shoulder. Putin patted him back. Then again, counter to protocol, Putin got into the limo with Trump, not a separate limo, with Trump. And then again, counter to protocol, when the press conference, which wasn't a press conference, it was just a statement to the press, happened, Putin spoke first. Usually the host speaks first, and then Putin follows. But no, Putin got the primary position. And he gave the whole rant about, correcting all the injustices towards Russia. Trump didn't correct anything. He didn't oppose anything. He didn't disagree with anything. He just gave Putin the stage. And then did they take any journalist questions? Well, of course not. Putin doesn't want to take questions from journalists in the West. Putin doesn't want to have to answer. He doesn't want the questions asked, never mind have to answer them. The luncheon was canceled. Putin got a photo up by laying some wreaths at some dead Russians' graves, crossed himself. I mean, he did the whole thing. He got to present himself as a good Christian. Just what a photo op for him. I mean, this boosts his credibility dramatically in Russia and around the world. It reestablishes his position as a world leader, and it makes America and Trump look tiny, not small, tiny. And what was the point? Why did Trump need this? Oh, he wants to bring peace. He just cares about peace. He wants the killing to stop. He doesn't like killing. He's against killing. How can you accuse Trump of anything? He just wants to bring peace to the world. You don't bring peace to the world by capitulating to thugs. You don't bring peace to the world by negotiating with monsters. FDR should have never met with Stalin. You don't, and for that matter, Nixon should have never gone to China. I mean, maybe open up to China. Nixon should have never gone and shook the hands of Mao Zedong. There's nothing to be gained. I said this on Friday. There's nothing to be gained and a lot to lose. A lot to lose by bolstering evil, by making them stronger, by making them more confident, and by showing your own weakness. By showing your own weakness. And notice the things that Putin said, the things that he said. He didn't say a lot of things, but the things that he said, the things that he emphasized, and the things that Trump said that Putin said. These are the things that matter. They're talking about peace, and they're talking about negotiating about Ukraine, and this is what Putin said. I would have never started this war if Trump were president. Allow me to laugh aloud. I mean, Putin understands Trump to the T. He knows how to push his buttons. He knows how to get on his good side. He knows that he's just bought himself a place in MAGA heaven, and Trump is going to be his best friend now. I would have never started this war if Trump were president. Why? What would have been different? He's not going to tell you. And then the second thing he said is, mail-in ballots, everybody knows they're crooked and they're really bad and they're ripe for fraud. And mail-in ballots, that's why Trump lost in 2020. Putin said that. Talk about another button he's pushing, another MAGA. He's going to become a MAGA hero at this rate. All he has to do now is talk about Jeffrey Epstein and talk about Pizzagate and pedophilia, and the guy is going to be enshrined in the MAGA Hall of Fame as maybe the next president of the United States. The hell with Trump. Let's go straight to Putin. So Putin plays Trump like a fiddle. He knows exactly which buttons. He knows how to get to his ego. He knows how to please him. He knows how to make as if he's his best friend. And what's Trump going to do? I mean, I wish we had a recording. I wish we had a recording of what happened in that meeting. But I can just see how, Trump would say stuff and Putin would just ignore it and just go on one of his historical lessons about the root causes of the war in Ukraine and how Ukrainians are really Russians. By the way, some of his demands are that Russian become an official language in Ukraine. He's demanding that, right, as a part of this peace deal. That the Russian Orthodox Church has free reign in Ukraine. This is the things that he cares about. He believes Ukraine is part of Russia. Anne is a piece of work. Anne, are you really Scott? I wonder if Anne M. is actually Scott, because she's starting to sound exactly like Scott. It really is amazing. She says, if these EU leaders are going to D.C., they must think a deal is close. No, they're afraid a deal is close. They're afraid Trump has given away the whole shebang and he's going to force Zelensky into complete surrender, which is what Putin demanded and what Trump basically accepted. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that Anne could think what she thinks. It's unbelievable to me how Trump has gotten inside. He's like a parasite who gets into some people's brain and starts eating away at it slowly and just turns them into these Trump zombies where they just cannot conceive, they cannot hold a position that suggests that Trump is wrong in any kind of way. It's like, it really is like a parasite that's eating away at your brain. I get on certain issues, but the reason the Europeans are coming to DC is so obvious. The failure of Trump to get anything from Putin was so obvious that to spin this positively, God. It's like the attempt to spin tariffs positively and a bunch of other really, really stupid things that Trump does as positive. All right. Anyway. Remember how Trump greeted Zelensky when they met? Remember how Trump greets any European leader or any other leader? And look at how he greeted Putin. And how many leaders get met by Trump at the plane, red carpet, warmth, smiles, shakes, touches? That just doesn't happen. It's just haven't happened. Trump has been always. He's just a Putin. I don't know, what do you call him? He is to Putin what Anne is to Trump. He's just a fan. He's a fanboy of Putin's. And he treats him like that. It's astounding. And I don't see how everybody doesn't see it. I really don't. I guess some of you don't see it, but I don't quite understand how that is possible. All right. So let's put this particular issue aside. God, it's hot in here. All right, let's put this particular issue aside. And let's step back, because, as I said, a principle, and I think this is a principle Ayn Rand articulated, it's not my principle, of dealing with leaders of other countries, is you do not negotiate, you do not compromise with evil. You do not deal with evil. She articulates this in the anatomy of a compromise. The only side to benefit from a compromise on principles is the bad side. And there's nothing the good has to gain from evil. And Putin is evil. Hopefully we can agree with that, although Anne might not agree with me. Putin is evil. So that is, I think, a principle of foreign policy. Now, we'll put this into context, because that's a little floating. So let's think about for a minute, because foreign policy is complicated. I mean, how do we deal with Russia? How do we deal with Russia in the context of the invasion of Ukraine? How do we deal with Israel and Hamas and Gaza and Iran, and what about Saudi Arabia? And what do we do with China? China's hard. And how do we deal with Taiwan? And what other responsibilities do we have? What do we do with NATO? And what do we do with Australia? Do we have an alliance with Australia? Should we have an alliance with Australia? How do we think about these things? What is the framework that determines how to think about foreign policy issues? And I will recommend, Peter Schwartz has an excellent, I think it's a small book on self-interest in foreign policy, which I highly recommend. And I think it's available. I think you can get it on Amazon. If not, you can certainly get it through the Ayn Rand Institute. But it's a small book on kind of the principles of self-interest as applied to foreign policy. So I've articulated a few that came to mind. I've attempted a little bit of a kind of a hierarchy to it, presenting in a hierarchy. And then we can talk about applications. And of course, that would be a great way for you to participate with regard to super chats by just asking different applications of this, how to apply to Taiwan, how to apply to South Korea, how to apply to whatever, to Gaza, whatever you want to talk about. And how do you apply it? This might apply to America. How does this play into small countries? Small countries might not have an option but to negotiate with evil sometimes. Is that true? Why is that? And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? So let's talk about what a foreign policy looks like, and I'll start with defending the idea of America first as the standard in foreign policy, not America first as Trump advocates for it, as Trump promotes it, or as as anybody in the Trump administration really conceives of it, but America first as America first. That is a self-interested foreign policy. A foreign policy that takes the interests of America and applies them. So the first principle is the role of foreign policy is the protection of American interests, and only American interests. Its selfishness is applied to the state. But what are American interests? And this is key. America's interests cannot be separate, and they are not separate. The state has no interest separate from the individual rights of Americans. If you think about the American government and its one role, one purpose, according to Ayn Rand, and to some extent, although with not a full understanding of what that meant, the understanding of the Founding Fathers, the role of the government is the protection of individual rights. At least that is clearly what is conveyed in the Declaration of Independence. A little less so maybe in the Constitution. So when I say American interests, that means the interests of American individuals, the rights of American individuals, the protection of those rights. Government doesn't intervene in commercial transactions. It doesn't intervene in competition. It shouldn't intervene in trade. We'll talk about that. All government does is protect rights. That's the fundamental. Everything else is a derivative. So, how do rights apply in an international setting? Well, they apply in the context that you have countries that might violate Americans' citizens' rights. They can violate those rights by killing them, hijacking an airplane, blowing it up, and that could happen anywhere in the world. They could violate those rights by invading the United States and violating the property rights of Americans and their right to life. They could violate those rights by stealing their property, by confiscating, nationalizing their property. Again, that could happen anywhere in the world. So the responsibility of the American government is basically the protection of the life and property of Americans. Now, for example, does that mean that the American government needs to protect the right of Americans for free speech? So they go to a country like England and they say something anti-Muslim, and England arrests them. And the answer is, probably not. Now, the American embassy in England should do everything it can, particularly in a case like this, to free the individual and should be there to support the individual, particularly with regard to an issue like free speech. And it, I think, should lodge a complaint with Great Britain and argue that this is a violation of rights. But this is not something you go to war for. And indeed, even among free countries, there has to be an understanding among Americans that as they travel, they are beholden to the law of the countries in which they travel. So as long as it's within kind of the rule of law in those countries, if an American has to pay taxes in those countries, or even if through some regulatory shenanigans the country confiscates their property, but it's within the rule of law, then the U.S. government, I think, can protest, but would do very little about it. It should make it understood to its citizens that as they travel around the world, they are beholden to the laws of the countries in these different countries. Now, if an authoritarian regime basically wholesale confiscates the property of all Americans living there or of American companies who've invested resources there, now that rises us to a different level. This is outside the rule of law. It's an authoritarian regime. And indeed, if this is an event of significance, like the nationalization of oil happened in the 1950s and 1960s, certainly the United States could take action. And what that particular action would depend on the particular circumstances to protect the rights of these companies and these individuals. This is not in the framework of you're traveling, you're investing around the world in free countries, respect their rule of law, and work within it. They're basically free. Yeah, they're not as free as we are, but they're basically free. This goes above and beyond that this is a massive violation of rights. Now, you could argue, well, if you go into a place like Saudi Arabia of 100 years ago, 75 years ago, there are no rights to be protected, but then, they, particularly on a strategic asset like oil, there is some expectation that the U.S. government backs this, is supportive of this. And maybe that needs to be made explicit in a transaction. I think in the world in which we live today, I don't think companies would be investing like they did back then without an explicit guarantee from the U.S. government. But the main thing is to protect the lives of Americans from enemies, from people who would kill them, people who would invade America, or people who would commit terrorist attacks against Americans, people who would blow up embassies, blow up planes, shoot up gatherings of Americans, and kill Americans at any opportunities possible. And, so overall, the purpose is of the U.S. Foreign policy is to protect the lives of Americans. And to protect America from invasion. And I'd say one aspect of protecting property rights is, and this is unique to the perspective that the United States has as, if you will, a superpower, to protect the right of Americans to trade, to protect the sea lanes, to protect against piracy. It is interesting that the first war the United States as an independent country fought, the first military action it took, was thousands of miles away from the United States. It involved the pirates of the Mediterranean, Islamic pirates off the coast of what is today Libya and Algeria, who were raiding ships, confiscating their property, enslaving the people in the ships. And some of these ships were heading to America. Some of these ships were American ships. But this was interrupting trade with America. And Thomas Jefferson was having none of it. And note that America was a young republic. It wasn't a superpower. It didn't have an all-powerful military. And yet, Thomas Jefferson sent units of Marines halfway around the world into the Mediterranean in an era of sailing boats, landed those Marines on the coast, I think, of Libya, rounded up the pirates and came to an agreement with them by defeating them that they would not touch ships bound from America. So trade, securing the shipping lanes, and make it possible for individuals to trade freely around the world. And a purpose of foreign policy, not necessarily of war, but of foreign policy, is to secure free trade. This is the travesty, well, an aspect of the travesty that is the tariffs and everything that Trump is doing. One of them, Ayn Rand defined maybe the main purpose of foreign policy is the securing free trade. She complimented the British Empire for its gunboat diplomacy that involved making sure that the ports of the world were open to British shipping, making sure that the ports of the world were open to trade with England. So, the United States should be going to every government in the world and encouraging them to reduce tariffs and trade barriers to zero. And the best way to do that is by doing it by example, is by lowering our own tariffs to zero. But instead, we get other countries to lower their tariffs to zero, and then we increase our tariffs on our people and tax our people at 15, 20, 30, 40%. This is nuts, irrational, anti-American. So, protecting Americans' right to trade, Americans' ability to, travel, at least within the free world, protecting their lives as they travel in the world, and at scale, at least, the protection of property rights. So, that is the purpose. Now, in order to do that, one of the most important principle from ethics that we can apply to foreign policy is the principle of justice. principle of justice. The principle of justice says you must judge. Judge your fellow man. Judge the good and the evil, the positive and the negative. Embrace the positive, befriend the good, or support the good, trade with the good, and resist, disengage from evil. Stay away from evil. So the first thing that has to be done for a proper rational foreign policy, I think, is to define who's good and who's not. And what are the standards? What's the criteria? Take a list of every country in the world. Who's good and who's not? Rank them on a basis of 1 to 10. I don't know. A free country is basically good. Free countries that are particularly friendly to America, that have zero tariffs with America, very good. Very, very good. Semi-free countries, mostly free countries that are friendly to America, yeah, they're good. Not great, very, very good, but good. Authoritarian regimes, they're bad. If they're friendly to America, they're only mildly bad. But if they're hostile to America, they're very bad. And if they're hostile with America and exhibiting all the signs that suggest that they would act on that hostility, they are the enemy. So one of the first things a president should do when coming to office is make up a list and define who's who. And I think I'm generally against government secrets. There are very few things that should be secret. The governments are our servants. They work for us. We should know about what they do and what they're thinking and why they're doing what they're doing. So you don't want the identity of spies disclosed. You don't want to give away intelligence assets. But short of that, there should be no state secrets. So the United States should make a list and publicize it. I don't know, Great Britain is an 8. And, Russia's a 2 or 1 or 0. I don't know. Iran is a 1, 1 meaning evil and an enemy. North Korea, a 2, evil and an enemy. Russia's a 2, China's a 4. I don't know, whatever, right? Israel's a 7, 8. So, put out a scale, put out a list. Different administrations can do it differently. They can have, Jennifer suggests, green, yellow, red countries. We can have green, yellow, red countries. I've suggested 3 different categories for diplomatic relations, and that I think applies. Friends, free countries, basically. So category 1 is not friends. Category 1 is free countries. Category 2 is unfree countries. And category 3 is unfree countries who are enemies. The smallest category is 3. There are not that many enemies of the United States anyway. There's a big category 2. And in my view, category 1 gets full diplomatic relations, defense of, complete free trade, mutual recognition, maybe even, in some cases, we'll get to this, defense treaties. Category 2 has no diplomatic recognition because you don't recognize the sovereignty of an unfree state, but no trade barriers, no restrictions on trade, generally open relationships, but no diplomatic relationship, no recognition, no moral sanction. And category 3 is the enemy. You don't trade. You boycott them completely. No trade, no diplomatic relationships, no contact, except to accept a surrender or to negotiate about things you have to. I don't know. You don't want to get into a nuclear war. If you can avoid it through negotiation, certainly that is worthwhile doing. Those would be the 3 categories, but within those categories you could have more red, less red, more green, less green, and so on. So the first thing is to apply justice. Who are the good guys, who are the bad guys? And they are good guys and they are bad guys. And, ask me about what the criteria would be, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard. Okay, once you do that, you've got to identify those countries or regimes that are currently posing a real threat to the lives of U.S. citizens and to America in terms of potential invasion, bombing, terrorism, whatever. And again, this list should be public. Off the bat, the easy ones are, Iran, killed many Americans, swears to kill more Americans, committed to killing more Americans, developing nuclear weapons with the hope of one day killing more Americans, dedicated to killing Americans. Not very powerful, not very strong, but it wants to kill Americans, responsible, funded terrorist attacks against Americans, and would do so again if it had the ability. North Korea has nuclear weapons, has ballistic missiles that can reach the United States, has threatened the United States, has threatened to use those weapons in the United States, is an authoritarian, totalitarian state, one of the worst in the world, maybe the worst in the world, totalitarian state, which is, by definition, not friends to us. But here it's hostile. It's explicitly hostile. That's two countries that are easy. Is Russia on this list? Is Russia clearly posing a threat to U.S. citizens? Maybe. I mean, this one you'd have to really dig deep. Clearly, Russia is an authoritarian, run by an authoritarian thug. So it's not a free country. So it's certainly not green. But is it yellow or is it red? Well, it's expressed a willingness in action to invade other countries that are basically free. It's invaded Ukraine. It's invaded Georgia. So it is, on the international scene, it has positioned itself as being willing to use force to achieve its aims. That is a huge red flag. It doesn't turn them red automatically, but it's a huge red flag, because if they're willing to do that to Ukraine and willing to do that to Georgia, why wouldn't they be willing to do that to the United States? And would they, in a conflict the United States might have entered, would they take the other side? Are they an active enemy of the United States? Are they seeking to hurt the United States in any way? And, Russia would have to be somewhere between red and yellow. Because of the invasion of Ukraine, I would tilt them more towards the red than of the yellow. But they're not like Iran. They haven't actively gone out and killed Americans. They haven't funded, as far as I know, and maybe I don't know, actively funded terrorism against the United States. So Russia's somewhere probably between yellow and red. But once you're in the red, once you're a country that is viewed as a threat to the lives of Americans, a number of things that have to happen. One, if possible, the threat must be immediately eliminated. Immediately eliminated. So whatever capacity they have to threaten American lives needs to be taken away from them. Now, when it comes to Iran, that is completely possible. If we deem the nuclear facilities a threat, they should be destroyed. All of them. Systematically. If we believe that they are funding terrorism that is targeted at Americans, then the regime must be toppled, or their economic ability to pose a threat against the United States needs to be eliminated, i.e., the oil industry needs to be blown up. That is, whatever the threat happens to be, and however seriously and however substantial you think that threat is, to that extent, that threat needs to be eliminated if possible, and I add if possible. It's a little bit more complicated with North Korea because they have nukes. So with North Korea, the solution might be develop a technology that makes it impossible for them to launch those nukes against you. There's a variety of things you could do. Knock them out of the sky before they reach above the atmosphere. Knock the facilities themselves out. But, if you're afraid that they might be able to launch a nuke against you, it might not be worth military action to eliminate the threat right now. And in that case, what you need to do is disengage, and this is true of the Iran situation, disengage, no trade. You cannot have trade with a country that wants to kill your citizens. So not sanctions. I don't believe in sanctions. I don't believe in tariffs. I believe in embargo. You don't trade. Zero trade. And maybe you even isolate them by stopping shipping in and out of North Korea. Every boat that leaves a North Korean port gets expropriated by an American Navy. And you isolate them and you disengage them with them. And you prepare whatever technology you need to in order to make sure they can never launch against you. I like the idea of kind of an iron dome in the United States, a steel dome. I can't remember what Trump called it. But I think that is a good investment. I think the United States should invest in making sure no ballistic missile can enter the United States. Remember, the ballistic missiles trying to come to the United States will have nuclear warheads. You can't let 1% of them in. You can't let any of them in. So you need to develop a fail-safe method, a golden dome, I think you called it, right? And that might involve lasers in space. It might involve lasers on the ground. It might involve the kind of things Israel did. The advantage the United States has is that its enemies are very far away, but they also have better technology than Iran had. So the United States needs to really work on a technological dome that protects itself, a golden dome that protects it from ballistic missiles. But you disengage and you isolate. And here's the thing. Between a country like the United States and North Korea, there should be no trade, no embassy, no relations, no negotiating, no meetings, no asks, no tit for tat, nothing. They don't exist. And if they try something, then you take them out. Now, let's say you identify Russia as an enemy. Well, it's an enemy you cannot eliminate the threat. You certainly cannot eliminate the threat before you have a golden dome. Because they have nukes, it's not worth engaging with them. But here is worth. It's worth isolating them. It's worth embargoing them. It's worth having no diplomatic relations with them. It's worth not meeting with them. It's worth not treating them as if they're a legitimate country. No trade, no embassy, no negotiations, no meeting their leaders, no invitation to any public forums, nothing. Treat them like the pariah that they are. And indeed, that should be done, even though they're somewhere between yellow and red. This is exactly how they should be treated. And in the case of Russia, since they clearly constitute a threat to NATO, they clearly are red vis-a-vis NATO, and we are members of NATO, and that means they're a threat to us, as long as we're members of NATO. Now, we can talk about whether we should or shouldn't be, but right now we are. Yeah, no sports teams, no playing with them, no Russian flag going up, no the foreign minister of Russia showing up in U.S. soil with a USSR shirt on. I mean, how disrespectful is that? How frigging disrespectful is that? If the United States had a shred of self-esteem, if the Trump administration had a shred of self-esteem, they would have asked the foreign minister of Russia to get on a plane and go home immediately. He should have never been invited, but and then, you can ask the question, how do you support Ukraine? How much do you support Ukraine? How do you support Ukraine? Again, I think if we had a proper foreign policy, Russia would have never invaded. To that extent, I agree with Trump. Not that I think he provides the proper foreign policy, but I think Russia invaded because of American weakness. If we weren't weak, they wouldn't have invaded. if they believed NATO was strong and united and would stand up to them, they wouldn't have invaded. All right, then you've got this yellow group. Well, maybe yellow, reddish. Yellow maybe becoming red, right? These are countries and regimes that might pose a threat to U.S. citizens in the future. They don't right now. But one, they're authoritarian, and authoritarian regimes can always potentially pose a threat. B, they might be nuclear, and they might be under the influence of an ideology that is fundamentally anti-U.S. or anti-Western, and therefore could easily pose a threat in the future, and therefore could become enemies. I mean, here I would think of Iran. Iran we've already covered. I think of China. Here I would think of Pakistan. You'd have to go through the different Arab countries, and some of them clearly would qualify here. They might not be an enemy right now, but they could easily switch. Now, none of them are really significant because they don't have nukes, they don't have a big military. It would be hard for them to really pose a threat, but look at Iran. And Qatar, for example, would be qualified here, right? It's funded terrorism against America. It was the main fund of ISIS. And it's the main fund of Hamas. So these are countries that you have almost no contact. You can trade with them. Americans can trade with them. But at their own risk, they get none of the protection from the U.S. government. There are no negotiations, except potentially the elimination of that potential risk that happens in the future. And if our allies are threatened by them, then we assist our allies to deal with them. But these are countries that don't yet pose a direct threat to the United States, therefore do not necessitate a direct military confrontation. They do not necessitate yet an embargo. But you want to tell your residents, your citizens, hey, you're trading with somebody who could become an enemy, you should think about it. And by the way, you're trading on your own. We're not going to protect your intellectual property rights. We're not going to protect it because of an authoritarian regime. There is no rule of law over there. You're doing this at your own risk. This should have always been the idea with China. Yeah, you want to go to China, you want to invest in China, fine. But remember, can't protect you. Now, if a country tilts towards, well, now it's become a threat, then now you have to have no trade, an embargo. And you see, if businesses know that, if businesses know that this country's kind of yellow but tilting towards red, and we might define it as red in the future, they might not invest as much in countries like that. They might hesitate, and indeed countries like that who want American investment, who want American tech, might try to become less red and more yellow and move towards the green. So you provide an incentive by making it public and explaining exactly what happens at every phase. You give them an incentive if they want trade with America, and most countries do, even the authoritarian ones. You provide them an incentive to move in the right direction, to get better, to become better. They'll have a relationship. We'll be much more open to trade. We'll negotiate. We'll have contact. We'll have an embassy. But you have to move in that other direction. And again, assisting allies here is really, really important, because one of the things that will distract a potential enemy from becoming one is if they have other challenges, countries that are challenging them and therefore distracting them. So I think it's important for us to support Ukraine so that Russia does not have time, energy, resources to focus on us. I think it's important for us to arm Taiwan and South Korea and Japan so that China has to think twice about going after us because it has to deal with them right in their backyard. You have to be strategic. You have to really think about strategically. And then, as importantly, one has to identify the dark greens, our allies. And here, our allies, particularly the dark green allies, the real allies, the committed allies, the long run allies, are going to be free countries. So here in today's world, Europe, much of Europe at least, countries like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Australia, potentially India, New Zealand, I'm thinking of Asia. Those are solid allies. Those are long-term allies. Those are those are countries that we should really consider having defense treaties with. In the Middle East, of course, Israel would be the only country. And with those countries, we should consider defense treaties, both vis-a-vis known enemies like China and Asia and Russia and Europe, and unknown enemies or potential future enemies like various terrorist organizations. And then we might also have temporary allies. Allies that we know are not dark green. They're not real allies. They're not fully committed. They're not free, necessarily as free. We don't know long term whether they're going to be on our side. These are temporary alliances that we might form in order to deal with a particular threat. So you might think of, some Arab countries in some contexts as allies in facing the Iranian threat. Although it's not clear to me we need allies to face Iran. Iran is so weak. So think about this in Asia. Think about maybe Indonesia and Malaysia, and maybe even Vietnam as temporary allies. Vietnam is not a free country. We would not have open, complete friendly alliance with them. I don't think we should have an alliance with Saudi Arabia. I think they're not the enemy. We have an arm's length relationship with Saudi Arabia, but I think we treat Saudi Arabia as as what they deserve, which is they're the bad guys. Now, they're not the bad guys so that they're a threat. They're not. They're not the bad guys in terms they pose a threat to any of our allies. They mostly don't. But they're bad guys in terms of the fact that they are a threat to their own people. They are not free. They have no respect for individual rights. And they cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted. So they might be a temporary ally in a particular confrontation, but certainly not a long-term ally. Certainly not a country that the first country a president goes to visit when he goes international. Certainly not we dance with them, we hug them, we befriend them. No. Arm's length. Arm's length. They're a thuggish regime, and we have to make our moral stance about them known. Judge. And in Saudi Arabia, atheists go to jail. Adulterers get stoned to death. It's not the kind of regime, and it's run by a king. We don't believe in kings. So I don't think we need to do anything about it. I just don't think we need to be the best friends either. And we certainly don't need to give them security guarantees. And if we need, I don't know what exactly we need from them, right? Particularly today when we don't need their energy. I don't think Kuwait would be a friend. Again, a temporary, short-term, momentary ally in a conflict, but not a friend. Again, they're thuggish. They're authoritarian. They're this close to being Islamist. Now, if we want, we can encourage them to be less Islamist, and as they become less Islamist, we can be more friendly. But I think we need to take a moral stand in the world. If you don't respect individual rights within your country, you are bad. Not as bad, and not a threat to us, so we're not you're not hostile to us, so we're not in an enemy position. But you are bad, and we will identify you as such. Not embargo, trade, free trade. That's good. So you can imagine mutual defense treaties with allies in Pacific Rim, in Europe, to contain China, to contain Russia. I don't think you need one in the Middle East because I think Iran could be eliminated within days, as Israel showed us. And I don't know what other region of the world you need an alliance. The United States, because of how weak almost all its enemies are, can deal with any one of them by itself. Now, maybe North Korea, it's good to have South Korea on our side, and that would be part of the anti-Chinese alliance, but it would also be part of an anti-North Korean alliance, but that's about it. And then finally, I did want to say something about Pakistan. Pakistan is just a bewildering country because Pakistan has nukes. It is Islamist in many respects. It's not an Islamist country. It doesn't impose Sharia law, but it has strong Islamist elements. And there are people who would like to impose Sharia law in totality. You have real Islamists, very close to power, and many of them are in the military, which controls the nuclear weapons. It's hostile fundamentally, philosophically to the West. Now, not everybody in Pakistan. Pakistan has this strong influence of the British Empire from colonial times. But that influence does not dominate, certainly not in the military, and doesn't seem to be in its politics. And yet, the United States is unbelievably friendly towards Pakistan. We send them weapons. We constantly grovel before them. We since 9/11, before 9/11, every administration. I mean, I think, again, a principled position in this part of the world should be India is a relatively free country. India is moving towards more freedom. India is our ally. Pakistan is an enemy. Maybe not an enemy, but Pakistan is a potential one-day enemy. It has nukes. We need to be able to neutralize those nukes. We need to be in a position to be able to eliminate any kind of ballistic missile with a range that can reach the United States. I don't think Pakistan has ICBMs yet, but I think they're developing them. So we need to make sure they don't. And we need to take a clear moral stance between India and Pakistan, based on the kind of governments they have, based on the respect they have for individual rights. Now, Pakistan is not a completely authoritarian place. It's just a mess, but it's not an ally. What's funny about Trump right now is that he is alienating India and befriending Pakistan. And that makes zero sense to me. Zero sense. And he's pushing India in the direction of Russia. And ultimately, Pakistan is going to be aligned with China. So there's zero reason to alienate India, even if it is close to Russia. We need to make it in India's interests not to be close to Russia. And I think if we weren't so friendly with Pakistan, I think that would happen. But Trump in particular is friendly with Pakistan. I think Pakistan has nominated Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, which is, if you want aid, and India did not support it. Pakistan supported it for Trump's help in getting a ceasefire between India and Pakistan, and India did not support it. And that's all it is, right? We didn't talk about this when we talked about Putin and Trump, but all Trump cares about is the stupid Nobel Prize. He doesn't care about peace. And he knows that Kissinger got the Nobel Prize for a peace deal that was violated within months and from his getting the prize, and resulted in South Vietnam being run over by North Vietnam, defeated by North Vietnam very easily. And he still got the Nobel Prize for peace, even though he didn't establish peace. Well, Trump knows this. So he knows that the Nobel Prize is about short-term success, not about long-term. So he just needs to get something so that the committee can vote him a Nobel Peace Prize. Anyway, those would be the principles I would apply to foreign policy. That would be the way I would apply them. I am happy to discuss different applications of this. If you guys have any questions in the super chat that you would like to ask, please feel free to do so. Super chat is open, has been open for a while. We're doing pretty well in the super chat. So please feel free to ask any questions about how would you apply it to this situation or that situation. But those would be the principles, I would say, that should guide our foreign policy. It should guide us when it comes to foreign policy. Hopefully that is of value and illuminating. All right, let's take some questions. Reminder to do a sticker or to ask a super chat. Let's see if there were any stickers. Yeah, Catherine, thank you. Catherine did a sticker. And let's see. We got Stephen Harper did a sticker. Yep. All right, 2 stickers. You guys can do more than stickers than that. $1.99, $2.99, anything like that. All right, let's start with Harper Campbell as a 2-part question. Harper says, just to clarify, I wasn't implying you or the liberty movement was inept if America does end up collapsing. This is from yesterday. The fact that our population could ignore the failures of fascism, which crumbled only 80 years ago, and the answers Rand showed us in Atlas suggest 2 things. Our intellectuals are evil, the people can't think their way out of a paper bag. Look, I think that's right. And look, it might be that we're incompetent. I don't know. If I thought we were, I would stop and I would shift strategy. But it does suggest that the culture's not ready, I think, for us. That their ability to think and their ability, particularly when it comes to morality and ethics, to evaluate morality and ethics is so screwed up that they just can't accept Rand's ideas. But I don't know what the answer is. Certainly the blame needs to be put at the intellectuals' feet, that not enough of them embraced Ayn Rand. And look, maybe there's a better strategy than what we're doing. If there is, find it. Happy to embrace it. All right, let's see. I think there was another $50. Yes, a couple of $50 still. James, this is a new debate with Craig and Alex O'Connor. Their first debate was about objectivity in ethics. This debate is over free will. Alex is an intellectual heavyweight with a huge audience. We need an objectivist of equal caliber engaging him. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Craig has an in with him for some reason. I don't know exactly why. Maybe, and I wouldn't be surprised, Craig pays him a lot of money, right? Craig has deep pockets. We do not, for these kind of things. So it might very well be the case that Craig just pays Alex O'Connor a lot of money for these debates, and that's why O'Connor's doing them. I will talk to people at the Institute and see if we can try to engage Alex and see if he would debate somebody from the Institute. But I don't think we'd be willing to pay him anywhere near what Craig is trying to pay him. The other thing is, and I think this is true, Craig has a limited audience. And he's trying to grow it. And he's willing to pay a lot of money to do something like debate Alex in order to grow that audience. We have a significant bigger audience, the Institute, and I think me personally. And we're not quite willing to put out that kind of money to grow the audience. But it's worth finding out how much it would cost, because it's certainly worth something. And I do think we need to put our best foot forward in that sense, and we need a philosopher, one of our, the highest powered philosophers we have, to engage in a debate with Alex. All right, Wes. Thank you, Wes. $50. Instead of a sticker, Wes is doing a super chat, and I think he's around. So usually he just comes in and out, but I think today he's on the show. He's here. This is great. Good to have you. What do you think the policy should be for American companies to sell arms to other countries? Should companies need approval from the government, or should the transaction just go through the government completely? A great question, and did I not mention it? It was on my list of principles. Let me pull that up. The last point on my list of principles was exactly this issue, because it's important to be embraced. So here's the thing. I believe American companies, American military arms companies, should only be allowed to sell to countries that are in the green, that are not potential enemies, and cannot become potential enemies. I think we sell weapons today to lots of countries that I don't think we should. And that, you know, and I think that could come back and hurt us. Now, it could be that we sell them with a kill switch. It could be that, you know, like the Egyptian military has huge quantities of American arms. They have M2 tanks, they have F-16s. I don't know that they have F-35s, but they certainly have F-16s. And they could use those weapons against Israel or against other American interests in the Middle East at any given point in time. Now, if we have the kill switch, okay, then I tolerate that, and we can kill it, or we have something that says you cannot use these arms unless we approve of it, then okay, then you can sell it to other countries as well. But look, you certainly can't sell it to people in the red. You shouldn't be able to sell it to most people in the yellow. Maybe there are a few exceptions in the yellow of temporary allies. We talked about temporary allies. And then you need a kill switch, whether it's a literal kill switch or some form of real kill switch. The only countries you should be able to sell it without any government permission are the green countries. And I think it should be sold directly from the companies, not through the US government. So the US government should be giving a thumbs up, a thumbs down. But it should be green is thumbs up, yellow is mostly thumbs down, but sometimes maybe thumbs up. You'd have to define it clearly. Red is always thumb down. And then even with the green, there might be weapon systems that involve such sophistication and military advantage for the United States that you say can't sell those. Can't sell those. Or at least until they're 5 years old or 10 years old, just so the United States can maintain its advantage, and just so, you know, other countries don't have access to our most advanced technology, something like that. So you would have to really think it through, and based on these categories and how you would sell them, have the companies sell them, but the United States government would have to be involved in determining that. All right, I'm gonna take one more question from Wes, because it's on topic here. What does justice look like for Putin as an individual? What should free countries strive for when it comes to specific warmongering dictators? Well, I think one has to come to the conclusion as an individual, Putin is evil. He's an evil human being, you know, based on his actions and based on his ideas. He has murdered people left and right. He has commanded his country to invade peaceful countries, Georgia, Ukraine. He has murdered people in the West. The poisoning of a number of different, Russian exiles in Western countries. He has killed journalists within Russia. This guy is a murderous thug and is evil. And I think what other countries should say is, we will have nothing to do with you. We won't buy your stuff. We won't trade with you. But certainly if you're Europe, we won't trade with you at all. We won't sell you stuff. We won't buy stuff from you. You're not invited here. And ideally, somebody puts a bullet through your head. I'm all for, by the way, I am all for assassinating world leaders when it is a means to protect the individual rights of Americans. And certainly, the Europeans have every reason to assassinate Putin. So certain leaders like that should be taken out. Now, I don't know if that changes things in Russia, but I think if you take out the leader and you make it explicit, we took him out because of this, because he threatened us, then I think next leaders will hesitant to threaten you. And they'll actually respect you for having the balls to take out their leader. So I'm all for assassinating world leaders if they pose a direct threat. And that is certainly true with regard to Putin. I mean, he's a mass murderer. The idea of shaking his hands, smiling at him, patting him on the shoulder is disgusting. It's just beneath any American president. Beneath. No American should do that. Never mind the president who represents me and you. Horrible. This is why I can't vote for president. At least I know I didn't vote for this disgusting human being. All right, I'm Meerkat. You didn't read my super chat about Trump being renamed Monica Putina and about the two of them, along with all authoritarians being insecure about the size of their manhoods. I don't remember seeing a pizza like that, a super chat like that. So I must have missed it yesterday. P.S. Gaza must be destroyed. Yes, and I guess I don't have a comment on Monica Putina. All right. That Doodle Bunny, a two-part question. Part one, who are these high IQ people you know who live mediocre lives? All the bright people I grew up with work in tech or finance and are very successful. Do their values and choices matter beyond their IQ? Yes, absolutely. But you can't deal with the levels of abstraction that arise in these careers without being born with a certain level of horsepower to begin with. I don't know how much horsepower you need for these careers. I just don't know. I don't know if you know. I don't know if any of us knows. What does it mean to have, I don't know, what's an average IQ? 110, 115? Let's say 110 IQ. What does it mean to have 110 IQ, but have the right values, the right ambition, the right choices, really work hard, really dedicate yourself, really invest the time and effort to figure stuff out? Are you going to be a better or worse programmer with somebody with 140 IQ who doesn't have those values? I don't think that's obvious. I don't think that's obvious at all. I know people in school who never studied for exams, got straight A's. Straight A's. They just went in, absorbed, got it, straight A's. I assume they had high IQs. I don't know. I've never taken an IQ test. As I said, I've never been interested in anybody's IQ. I don't really care, right? I care about their intelligence, but I don't think IQ measures that. I care about the intelligence, their ambitions, their values. I care about the package. But I don't know my wife's IQ. I don't know my kid's IQ. I don't know my IQ. I know my wife's IQ is high, but I don't know how much it is. So what constitutes success? And what's required for success? Yeah, some basic, yeah. If you got Down syndrome, you're not going to be super successful at programming. Granted, if you got an IQ of 80, you're not going to be super successful at tech. Granted, but you can be super successful at something else. There are lots of successful businessmen who don't have high IQs. So yeah, the particular tech field, science field that needs a certain horsepower. But what is that horsepower? And how much above average does it have to be successful? I don't know. And neither do you. I don't think anybody knows. And particularly given that we live in a world where people don't choose the right values and don't make the right choices and don't have the right kind of ambition. We certainly don't know what people are capable of, what you're capable of with the IQ that you have. I mean, I remember always hearing these stories about we only use a small percentage of our brain power. I mean, if that's true, I don't know what that means exactly again, but that's true if you've got a low IQ but use more of it versus somebody who has a high IQ and uses less of it. How does that play out? So, way too complicated. But yeah, I know a lot of people who had IQ and did nothing special with their lives. I mean, okay, so they're good at programming. And they've been programming us all their lives. They never made it big in Silicon Valley. They never did anything substantial. Their programs never changed the world. They never made a lot of money. They made good money for a programmer, but never a lot of money. But lots of them. I mean, most high IQ people are just average lives. I mean, just the fact that you work in tech and finance, does it mean you're successful? I know a lot of people who work in tech who are not successful. It could be a cog in a machine. One more program. I know people who might have low IQ but have done phenomenally well in tech. For example, maybe they're not the best programmers in the world because they don't have the horsepower, as you call it. But they're better managers than anybody with a horsepower. I mean, are there people who have more horsepower than senior managers in tech companies? Yeah. Because senior managers in tech companies don't need to know the horsepower to program. I mean, take AI, for example. Meta just hired a bunch of AI engineers. They're all going to make a lot of money. Do they have higher IQ, probably, than Zuckerberg? Yeah, probably. Zuckerberg's still richer than them. So, what is success? How successful? What is horsepower? How do you apply it? These are complicated things, and if you focus too much on IQ, I think you lose the plot. All right, Andrew. The non-objectivist freedom advocates haven't discovered the utility of morality, no less argue on a proper morality. Dogmatism has drained morality's power. The topic of morality is being robbed of the power of science, cause and effect, thoughts. I don't think that's quite right. It's not that dogmatism has drained morality's power. That's not it. It's not an issue of dogmatism. It's an issue of a false morality. A false morality has dominated the field. A false morality is all that people are exposed to. A false morality is what people are flooded with when they're young. It's all they know. It's all they hear. It's all they can think of. And therefore, they have no idea of the power of morality because all they know is a false morality. And maybe they read Ayn Rand and they've been marginally exposed to Ayn Rand's ideas, but they're so out there. They're so different than the morality that they're being taught that they don't consider them. They can't even conceive of them. They can't integrate them. So what's distorted and perverted and robbed them is the fact that since they're little kids, they have been inundated with a false moral code. And they've assumed that that is morality. That is all of morality. And they can't conceive of something different. And that makes it very hard when you come up with something different for them to even figure out how to even deal with it. And when they read Ayn Rand, they marginalize it. Do you think morality is thought of as a science? I think by scholastics might have, in some sense, but a science derived rationalistically from first principles found in the Bible. Not a science derived from facts of reality. Nobody thinks about it that way except Ayn Rand. But the scholastics think of it in terms of rationality. Again, a rationality that's rationalistic, divorced from reality. So yeah, all altruistic morality, all morality other than Ayn Rand's, is divorced from reality, and that's divorced from science in that sense. And thus divorced from cause and effect, properly understood. But it's the falsehood that is at the core. Once they're willing to accept, oh, maybe everything I've learned about morality, maybe everything human beings believe about morality for the last 2,000 plus years is false. Once they're willing to accept that, then you can offer an alternative. Then you can suggest science. Then you can suggest reason. But if they've just said, look, like almost all of the thinkers, this is morality. This is. I mean, you guys are just playing with words, but this is morality. Morality is what the Christians say it is. It's always been thus. It always will be thus. And our job is just to figure out how to justify it rationally. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Not your average algorithm. Is it better to go through life lonely than to deal with irrational people? We need socialization for an upbeat mood, but most social circles today are quite toxic, riddled with irrationality and envy. I think you have to, so there's no excuse to be lonely. So I don't want to give anybody an excuse to be lonely. There are good people in the world. And if it means you have to spend more time and more effort, then spend more time and more effort. You know, if you come to Okan, there are plenty of good people at Okan. And if you don't find them in the first time, come a second time, come a third time, come a fourth time, until you figure out who the good people for you are, who your friends, who you can befriend. And even outside of objectivism, there are good work buddies. There are people who you can hang out at work with, and you can go have a beer after work with, and they're nice people and friendly people, and you might have barbecue with them, and they're never going to be in agreement on ideas, and you might not want to talk politics with them, but you can hang out with them and enjoy them. There are women who might, I assume you're a male, I don't know you are, but I assume you are. There are women who might not share all your values, but share enough that they're worth befriending and hanging out with, and maybe even having sex with and having a relationship with. So I find this giving up on social relationships sad and unnecessary. I also think that a lot of people use objectivism as an excuse to do it, and that I am very much opposed to. So I would suggest that you find ways in which not to be lonely, to socialize, find healthy groups of people. They are out there. They are. I know because I hang out with people, and I know other people who hang out with people, and there are plenty of them, and you just have to expend the energy and the resources to find them. Neocon. Bolton warned that Putin will play Trump like a fiddle. He doesn't seek peace, only delay, buying time to regroup, mislead, and prolong the conflict. Yeah, I agree with Bolton completely. Bolton is one of the few good thinkers in foreign policy. I mean, relatively good. He's wrong on some things, but relatively good. Let me just make a call for more questions, particularly $20 questions, 4 specifically, and we can reach our goal. So our goal is $500, $250 an hour in our second hour. We're at $416, so we need $84. A few stickers and a few $20 questions, and we are there. So please consider doing that. Please consider supporting the show. Before you leave, I know people are coming in and out. Please consider liking the show. Pressing that like button doesn't cost you anything. Helps out. It really helps with the algorithm. Michael, does the lack of Christian altruism in China play a factor as to why they don't have a welfare state? No, I don't. I mean, maybe. I'd have to think about that. I really think it has more to do with the fact that they're a poor country and they're focused because the rulers of the country are focused on economic growth. They're focused on China and nationalistic goals. They want to grow. They want a successful economy, and they realize that a welfare state would hinder that. Although the West is telling them, a lot of Western economists are telling China, you want to grow faster establish a welfare state so that people will save less and consume more, and consumption will drive the economy faster. I'm not kidding. That is the advice they're getting from Western economists. Whereas some of us know that what China's success is to a large extent due to its savings, and that saving is what drives long-term investment and therefore economic growth. But a lot of Western economists believe that it's consumption, and therefore they want to see the Chinese save less, consume more, and to do that, they need to be reassured about their retirement, so they need more of a welfare state. That's how crazy it is. But I don't know if it's Christianity. It might be Christianity. It might be part of that. I think China, if it became rich, would institute a welfare state ultimately, because I think it has a form of altruism as well. Not as strong as Christianity. So maybe, maybe it's not as strong. It's true, we have lots of Christian Western countries that are not rich that have welfare states. But they're also not ambitious. China's ambitious. I think the lack of Christianity generally is good for China. Whatever good is happening in China, the fact that they're not Christian is helping. All right, we're down to $59. So only 3 $20 questions left because Stringer Bell did a $20 sticker. So thank you, Stringer Bell. Really appreciate that. That really helps out. And Roland did a sticker as well. Thank you, guys. And Enric, I see. And Catherine, I thanked already. So thank you, guys. More stickers, guys. Particularly if they're 20. More stickers. Simon. Would it be morally justified to annex Gaza? I mean, yes, it would be completely morally justified. The question is, would it make sense? That is, from the perspective of Israel, it doesn't make sense. If you annex Gaza, what do you do with the residents of Gaza? Do you make them Israeli citizens? Now you have to govern Gaza? You have to police Gaza? Do you really want to do that? Are you willing to put the resources into that? So the annexation is the easy part. It's what do you do with the population is the hard part. And that annexation does not solve. It does not solve the problem. But morality, absolutely, there's no question about it. In terms of rights, again, morality also takes into account, is it in your self-interest to annex Gaza? And do you have a plan? Michael, if we were really headed to another dark ages, wouldn't we be getting poorer every decade? In reality, every generation is significantly richer than the former. I mean, that is certainly one way to think about it, but was Rome getting poorer every decade? Not clear. I don't think so. I think it, to some extent, fell off a cliff. And maybe we would fall off a faster cliff. I mean, GDP, in other words, wealth, income in the United States, dropped 25% during the Great Depression. All at once, very quickly. We became 25% poorer. Now think about that, 25% poorer. That's a lot. That's a lot. All like that. Could a Dark Ages be a series of Great Depressions? Where we don't get out of it? We keep tumbling? Again, there's no evidence to suggest we're heading from an economic perspective to a Great Depression. There is evidence that we're going to have some kind of financial crash. You can't take on the kind of debt that we are taking on without some kind of day of reckoning. So, what is, I don't know what, I don't know that it has to happen slow. It could happen fast. I'm not saying it's happening, but it could. James, the way Mamdani and Bernie Sanders are watered down Marxism, is MAGA watered down Nazism? I think it's more watered down fascism. I think Nazism is too, I don't know. And I don't think Mamdani and Bernie are watered down communists, right? I think they're watered down socialists. I don't know if they're watered down communists, mega watered down fascists. I think that is the right way to look at it. They're all statists. I think thinking in terms of Nazism and communism is not helpful right now because it's not where we're heading. There are other forms of fascism and there are other forms of socialism. Michael, how come the Germans are so stiff and no humor culture while Britain has a fantastic comedians and a culture of sarcasm? They're both Protestant Christians and riddled with altruism. I don't know. It has to do with how seriously, kind of the seriousness of the underlying culture. And I don't know, there's something about Germans that makes them different. How come Germany developed the Nazis and Britain never did? Germany had real authoritarian periods in the 19th century under Bismarck, in the 20th century Hitler, and UK never did. It just got freer and freer and freer. It had some bouts with some form of socialism, but it never became authoritarian. Germany has an authoritarian streak in it. Britain does not. Why is that? It's probably to do with the philosophy and ideas that they've adopted culturally. Germany has been a free country for very little of its history. It doesn't have intellectuals that advocated for freedom, really. And it doesn't have a tradition of freedom. Britain does. Maybe that translates somehow into sense of humor, but I don't know beyond that. Andrew, is there a connection between collectivism and loneliness? Not marginalizing social life, but skeptical of collectivist claim that man is a social animal and the relationships are a main factor to happiness. I do think there is a relationship, a connection between the two. I think it's probably multidimensional. I think collectivism tells us to find our values in other people. And people go out and they try to look for values in other people and they can't find them. And they can't connect because they want to find their values with other people. But they don't really connect with other people. They don't find it there, and then they become lonely and disappointed by that fact. Whereas if you're an individualist, then you define your values, you know what your values are, and then when you go and to meet other people, you're not looking them to shape you, you're looking for them to reflect back to you your own values. You're looking to find commonality. You're looking to find interest, shared interests. So the whole approach to socialization is different, to being in society, to having friends, is different between a collectivist and an individualist. An individualist is not looking for them to rescue, for rescuing. They're looking to the outside world for real companionship, for the visibility of shared values. And the collectivist is looking for the collective to give them something, to give them meaning, to give them purpose in life. So yes, collectivism distorts the incentives, distorts the reasoning for seeking friendship, and creates disappointment. Wes, you may have answered this, but what should a smaller, weaker country with an orientation towards freedom do if it's surrounded by potential enemies? What's a good policy? Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't cover that, but it's a great question. I think what it needs to do is a few things. One, it needs to build up its self-defense capability and maximize it. And ultimately, the best way to maximize it is having nukes. So I think small countries should have small countries should all have nukes. It's the only thing that ultimately will protect them. Israel has nukes exactly for that reason. It's surrounded by hostile countries. And it needs the ultimate weapon. It needs to be able to defend itself no matter what. Second, because you don't want to land up with the nukes, you want to form alliances. You want to have friends. Friends who can help you with weapons, help diplomatically help in whatever way to keep the bad guys away from you. It's great to befriend the United States of America, and maybe if you have a shared enemy, to unite with them in some kind of defense alliance. Or ally yourself with Europe, like Ukraine is doing, trying to do anyway. You want to have friends. So those, I think, are the two things. That is, build up a self-defense capability, and with the ultimate self-defense weapon being a nuclear bomb, and nuclear capabilities, not just one bomb. And second, have friends. Have good guys as friends. I think that would be it. But the same thing. Judge these countries. Identify them clearly. Who's who? Who you can trust, who you can't. Who's your friend? Who's your enemy? Who are your allies? Who's long-term? Who's short-term? All that should be out in the open, clearly defined, clearly articulated, and then act accordingly. Israel is a good model. Taiwan should follow Israel's path, and the United States should help it. South Korea should follow Israel's path, and the United States should help it. Ultimately, Japan should be a nuclear country, as long as it's facing China. All right. Jacob, thank you for the sticker. Jacob says, sticker was for the restaurant recommendations. Yeah, I hope they go to some of them and enjoy them. Let me know what they think. But happy to do it. Jeffrey, thank you for the sticker. Really, really appreciate it. I got some restaurant recommendations for you, Jeffrey, for Lisbon. If you're ever in Lisbon, we're not done with Lisbon restaurants yet. We've got 2 more significant ones to go this coming week, and then I'll have it all worked out. It's not quite Barcelona, but the food here is good. It's better than it was the first time or the previous times I've come to Lisbon. This time we've discovered more good restaurants. We've been positively surprised at the quality of food, including it some, just kind of the run-of-the-mill restaurants you just walk in without recommendations. The food is good. Food is good. All right, Mike. Mike says, I'm late for the party. You're never late. You can always rewind. Andrew, in what ways do you think George Washington's principle of no foreign engaged entanglements, which Rand once touted, is valid? I think it's valid in the sense that in that era, and I think later it was somewhat true, the United States had no self-interested reason in getting involved in European wars. Europe was not a threat to the United States. It was too far away, and it's still true to this day to a large extent. Now, nukes make a difference. Membership in NATO makes a difference. But generally, Ayn Rand was against U.S. intervention in World War I. They posed no threat to the United States, really, although the Germans did, take out American ships and did provoke the United States. But they couldn't invade the U.S. I think World War II and post-World War II illustrated that, if you have long-range ballistic missiles, you can hurt a country anywhere. So everybody's a threat who has a ICBM. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. That was pretty far away. And they potentially could have been a threat to California. So I think that the important part is you don't want to get involved in foreign wars where you have no interest. But you have to clearly define what your interests are and get involved where it's necessary. And it's not often that it's necessary, in my view. But you should get involved. You don't have to get involved in India, Pakistan, even though you can easily say India, the good guys, Pakistan, the bad guys. But if Pakistan wins and is emboldened by it and somehow has money and funds Islamic terrorism, then they become our problem as well. So you have to you have to be alert to when is America at risk, when Americans, individual Americans at risk. And I think certainly in the 18th, 19th century, it was much easier to not get involved in foreign entanglements. It became much harder later on, as foreign entanglements could easily come to you. Raymond, what is the principle of privacy based on? To what extent tracking legit? A shopkeeper can notice your purchase and recommend online stores. I mean, privacy is based on, your autonomy, the fact that you own the things that you produce, and you own the information you produce. You own the information you possess. So, nobody has a right to your address or phone number. Nobody has a right to your purchases. Now, once you bring your information into the public domain, then all that changes. So, if you are buying something at a store, and particularly today, the assumption is the store will now recognize what you bought and knows that about you, that you bought the stuff. You're not buying anonymously. If you want to buy anonymously, use cash. So you recognize that once you use your information in public. Now, you could imagine an internet based on information being owned by individuals, and the internet could have evolved in this way, where it wouldn't be that you gave up the right to your privacy when you logged on to the internet, which you do today. But it would be the other way around, that you opted, you would have to, the assumption was privacy, and you would have to give permission for different companies to use your information for different things, to track you, for example. So you could flip it. But it doesn't really matter, because once you establish the standard and everybody accepts that standard, then they've accepted the standard. It's an implicit contract. So you have no expectation of privacy online, because that's not how online is set up. And you know that going in. It's not, you're not being defrauded. If you're walking in the street, a private street, let's say, but there are cameras all over the place, you have no expectation of privacy in that sense, that somebody's watching you. And they might use that information. They might save the tapes. If you don't want it, don't go on that street that has the cameras. Now, it's different than when the state does it. And here's where privacy is important. Your information, your data, everything about you should be private vis-a-vis the state. The state has no right to it. When you're giving it up online, when you're giving it up in a private store, you're not giving the state permission for it. You're only giving the store permission for it. You're only giving online companies permission for it. Now, the Supreme Court advocates for something called the third-party doctrine. This is something Amy Peikoff talks a lot about. The third-party doctrine is a doctrine that says that once you give up your privacy at a store or online, you've given up vis-a-vis not just the store and online, you've given it up vis-a-vis the government, and the government has a right to it. And that is wrong. And I think Amy makes good arguments about that, and has written about that. So Amy's the expert on that one. Raymond goes on, what about a dumb camera that does head count but not faces? Well, I think if it does faces, it's fine, as long as you know it's there. Or you're going into somebody's private property, and the assumption is that it's there. What about building a profile of your location, spending, etc., but not your face or name? I mean, I think all of that is permissible as long as it's private and as long as you haven't opted out of that. And the assumption today is that's what they're doing. But it could be the opposite. We could have built an online presence in stores where you'd have to opt into it, but we didn't. We built it the other way around. Stringer Bell, hi Yaron, what are your thoughts on living in Portugal as a digital nomad? I mean, I think it's great. If you can live as a digital nomad, and you can Portugal has a good tax regime, as far as I understand. It's got good internet. Its cost of living is low relative to the United States and relative to many other places in Europe. Food here is quite a bit cheaper. We noticed that, like, buying the pods for the Nespresso, about half the price than in the US, or at least in Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico, I have to pay a high price because you have to ship it in. But generally half price. A lot of food here is much cheaper. Restaurants are a little cheaper, not a huge amount, but a little cheaper. So it's cheaper cost of living here. So yeah, Portugal's a very nice place. The weather's great. The people are friendly. It seems like a vibrant city. There's a lot going on. So yeah, I think it's one of the places I consider right now. This and Greece seem to be the two places that people are going to the most. Greece has problems. Greece is much more leftist culturally than Portugal. Much more commie. I mean, Greece has a very well-established, prominent left. It's also very anti-Israel, very anti-Semitic because of that, because the commies are that way. Michael, is it likely, as Russia collapses, it launches its nuclear payload as Hitler would have if he had them? No, I don't think so, because I don't think Putin and the rest of them are really suicidal. I don't think they do that. And, the generals that have to also be involved in it, I think there are a bunch of people there who are not suicidal enough to actually do it. And there's no ideology of 72 virgins on the other side. Jacob, would the Japanese occupation have looked like the Israeli Gaza if they didn't unconditionally surrender and MacArthur writing the Constitution? I don't know. It depends on how the Japanese would have fought and to what extent they were willing to use their civilian population as shields, and would they have taken hostages, and would they engage in terrorist activities? Potentially, as it is, Japan was more destroyed without the occupation than Gaza is today. Gaza has more buildings standing than Tokyo did, I think. So I'm not sure. It's very contextual as to what would have exactly happened. Benjamin from Oslo, have you considered the moral aspects of forced and Western ideas in the Middle East? Is it fair to expect Arab countries to adapt short term? Well, this is the thing. If they don't adapt, that's fine, but then they have to suffer the consequences, right? If they don't adapt, then you just don't deal with them. If they're hostile, you have to deal with their hostility. If they don't adapt but stay peaceful, then you just ignore them. But the reality is that if they're hostile, they have to be beaten down until they're not hostile. There's no alternative. Otherwise, you're engaged in self-sacrifice. So you have to be willing to do whatever's necessary to pacify them. And then if they want to become part of civilization, if they want to become part of, what is the term, something of nations, right? Then they have to become civilized. And to become civilized, they have to adopt Western values. It's not about forcing them. It's about explaining to them the consequences if they do and if they don't. Simple. If they don't, they stay poor. And if they engage in force, they get crushed. If they do, they'll get rich and then be embraced as part of the world community, the civilized world community. And I think every country in the world should face that alternative. Not just in the Middle East. It's true of Africa, true of Asia. It's not that you're forcing ideas, that you're explaining the consequences. And look, if you're not hostile, we leave you alone. We're just uninterested. We're not going to force these ideas on you as long as you're peaceful. But if you're not going to be peaceful, if you're going to attack us, we're going to crush you. And we're going to demand your pacification one way or the other. And one way, one easy way that also gets you rich is to adopt Western values. Clinton Grund, German here. Hello. I totally agree. Germany sucks. Most young people like me feel the same. Unfortunately, our best intellectuals are not that sharp. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about Germany, of course, is your best intellectuals. This goes to a comment that we've been discussing from the beginning of the show, from earlier in the show. That a lot of German intellectuals have very, very high IQ, and yet they suck, and they're not that sharp. I think that's right. They have high IQ, but they're not that sharp. In other words, they're anti-liberty, anti-individualism, which is the important thing. They're anti the individual. Okay, Benjamin has a correction. He said, I should have used the word realistic, not fair. Well, I mean, look. I don't know why you have so little, belief, so little trust in Middle Easterners. At the end of World War I, what did you think the possibility was that Japan would become Western? And yet it did. At the end of the Korean War, what were the chances that South Korea would become Western and one of the richest countries in the world? At the time, it was one of the very poorest in the world, poorer than North Korea. And yet, look how well it's done. I mean, you could go on and on. Why are Asians better than Middle Easterners? Now, maybe Middle Easterners have to deal with Islam. Well, okay, they need to deal with Islam. That's one of the things preventing them from westernizing. So tell them, explain to them in bold letters that they have to deal with it. But as human beings, as individuals, they're no better, no worse. I think just like with children, they, to some extent, adapt to our expectations. Expect them to be barbarians, they'll be barbarians. So how realistic is it? I think it's quite realistic if we're willing to really insist on it and explain the consequences. You know, they're individuals. They took some steps towards westernization in the early part of the 20th century. Wasn't very successful, to a large extent because of the West's fault. But there's nothing in their blood, in their genes. Their culture needs to change. Like Japan's culture changed. Like South Korea's culture changed. And they still need to change more. And European culture needs to change even more. German culture needs to change, because it needs to become more individualistic for it not to suck, as Clinton says. So we have to demand cultural change. It could take a long time. I'm not saying it happens quickly. It could take a generation or two. You know, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the people of Israel spent 40 years in the desert, in the Sinai desert, before they reach the Holy Land. 40 years. Sinai desert is very small. It's very difficult to be lost for 40 years in the Sinai desert. I mean, you'd have to be really talented to lose your way in the desert for 40 years in that small of a desert. Why 40 years? Why were they kept out of their homeland, or they're returning to their homeland for 40 years? And this is one of the most rational things in the Bible. God basically said, you people have the mentality of slaves. You were raised as slaves. You lived as slaves. You were educated as slaves. You are not fit to be a free people. He told us, the Jews. And he said, the generation of slaves needs to die out before you enter the land of Israel. Before you enter the Holy Land, before you establish your own political entity. Okay, so maybe it takes 2 generations. 40 years. That's what the Bible says. And that's on the Jewish people. They weren't fit to establish your own political entity. Well, maybe the Palestinians need 40 years as well. All right, Dean. Your opinion on Israeli protests today to end the war, are they useful idiots, or that anyway Bibi will not go the whole way in Gaza, so why bother trying? I don't know if they're useful idiots. I mean, they are, in a sense. They're idiots. And sadly, members of my family are in the I'm sure in the protest today. They don't understand. I mean, two things. Look, idiots is the wrong term. There are two issues here. The war should have ended 2 years ago. Well, okay, a year and a half ago. The war should have ended at least, most it should have taken is 3 months after October 7th. So, yeah, protesting the frustration of an endless war, I can understand that. But that's not their solution. Their solution is not, okay, get it over with, let's do it. Their solution is, no, we should surrender. So it's defeatism. I wouldn't call them useful idiots because I don't think they're quite that. Because, again, it's a combination. It's defeatism. They're accepting that they can't win. They're accepting that this government of right-wing fanatics couldn't win in Gaza. Who else could win? And that's just sad and pathetic. And it will function as useful idiots because it'll embolden Hamas. There's no question about that. Adam. Marxism ignored the role of ideas. Even under Soviets, Poland sent economic graduates to study with Marxists, but to study Austrian-influenced Robert Harbrunner. They returned, they formed KOR to give solidarity core ideas, KOR model for US. I don't know what KOR is. Yes, I think that's right. I think Marxist, the real Marxist, the committed Marxist, don't understand the role of ideas. I mean, it's a deterministic philosophy. It's a philosophy that says ideas don't matter. There's a certain algorithm in history, and it plays out, and it doesn't matter what you do and what you say and what you think. And I think that explains why ideas were circulating in Eastern Europe. They were pretty far away from communism, and why, they tried to shut them down, but didn't make that big of an effort. And they allowed certain ideas to come in, like, this KOR. So yes, the philosophy of Marxism is one where history is already determined. We already know its path. Nothing you do really matters. Which is bizarre for an activist movement that has a vanguard and tries to educate. But that's the problem with determinism. It doesn't make any sense. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you for everyone being here. It is unbelievably hot in this room. I need to get out of here. I'm sweating like a pig, about to be slaughtered. Outside, it's going to be a lot cooler and a lot nicer. It is 10 o'clock p.m. It's going to be perfect weather outside. It's 70 degrees. It'll actually be cool, cold, cool. It'll be amazing. All right. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll be on tomorrow. Oh, Michael came in quickly. He says, while Germans today shouldn't feel guilty for the Holocaust, do they have a moral responsibility to make sure it never happens again? Or is that sentiment still too collectivistic? I mean, no, they have a moral responsibility to understand what happened, to know history, and to make sure it doesn't repeat. Yes. They're people just like them, educated in a very similar educational system, bought into whatever Hitler was selling. They need to know how to not fall for the same trap. How not to let it happen again. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, your time, maybe about the same time as today, 3 o'clock East Coast time. I'm hoping that's the time. See you then. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and have a good